you all for joining. We are going to get started here as it's 1:05 and I want to keep on track with time. So good afternoon and thank you for joining today's 4-hour More Sustainable Than You Think webinar with a focus on Western Canada. My name is Brittany Thibodeau. I'm the Communications Specialist here at Fertilizer Canada, and joining me in co-hosting is my colleague Kelsey Hill, Coordinator of Forest Nutrient Stewardship, and all presenters of this webinar are relevant members of the fertilizer industry. This is the second webinar of the series, and we'll be highlighting forest nutrient stewardship and how to implement the 4 Rs and achieve the benefits of an abundant and healthy crop, focused on the importance of economic, environmental, and socially responsible product use. Participation in this webinar grants 1.5 CEU credits in nutrient management for CCAs. There will be a slide at the end where you can scan the QR code with your mobile device to receive CEUs immediately. And to begin, I'll have a few housekeeping items. In order to document the webinar and provide a copy of the information to interested but unavailable participants, we will be recording the webinar and audio. This informational webinar is scheduled to take place from 1 p.m. till 2:30 p.m., but may end early depending on our discussion time. There is a scheduled panel discussion at the end of the webinar. For consistency and timing, please save your questions for the designated discussion period. During this period, you may ask your question through the chat function via Zoom. To do so, tap the screen to make the control bar appear. Then tap on Participants. At the bottom of the list, tap Chat and type your message and then tap Send. You may also email your questions to myself or Kelsey. Contact information will be provided at the end of our session. We'll move on here to our agenda. So we will be going over a review of the 4 Rs, the benefits, best management practices, research, designation, and then 4 Rs in the Saskatchewan climate change strategy, followed by a panel discussion. And today we have Dan Heaney with Random Cross Consulting, Kelsey Ellis with the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture, Mike Hillhurst with Federated Co-op, Robin Gerard with Wetaskiwin Co-op, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and I know I did, and then Simon North with Cargill. With that, I will pass it over to Dan Heaney as he presents on the 4 Rs.
Thanks, Brittany, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get to our panel, I'm going to spend about 20 minutes going through a bit of a review of 4R and touch on some of the 4R activities going on in Canada, as Brittany outlined in the agenda. So let's just start with a few key points on 4R. And one of the main points I want to make is that 4R is a balanced sustainability program, and that the key to sustainability is to balance between economic, social, and environmental outcomes. And the way we do that with 4R in the right management of nutrients is for producers to develop best management practices. Those are best management practices that are appropriate to the cropping system on their farm, but they're anchored in some basic scientific principles and local or regional research results. So the idea of anchoring 4R BMPs within this framework of scientific principles is it makes BMP flexible, but also founded in good relevant science. And the sciences that inform the development of BMPs for the farm are soil science, crop science, agronomy, and also economics and some of the environmental sciences as well. The other point I wanted to make here is that when you think about it, every nutrient management decision has to have a source, rate, time, and place decision as part of it. But we also have to consider that to be 4R, those decisions have to be the right decisions. And by right, we mean decisions that first balance economic, social, and environmental outcomes, and in general, increase or improve the fertilizer use efficiency within the cropping system. So the whole point of being right is to balance off the the economics and agronomic performance of the fertilizer against the environmental and potentially social costs. And finally, and this is, I think, a very important point, is in a 4R program, when you initiate one with your producers or growers, if you're initiating it on the farm, it's very important that it's a 4R plan has some achievable goals, but those goals or the outcomes are measured, evaluated, and adjusted going forward. So it's not a static approach to nutrient management. It's got an aspect of continual improvement. So let's just spend a minute or two on the idea of a balanced approach and build it out a little bit more. Starting with the environment, we all rely on the environment to deliver necessary ecological goods and services, such as breathable air and drinkable water. Farmers, in particular, are managers of and dependent on an agro-ecosystem or cropping system. So it has to function, this ecosystem has to function well in order to sustain their operations. A healthy agro-ecosystem also provides society with a wide range of benefits, food being, of course, at the top of the list. And finally, a healthy agro-ecosystem is key to farmers being economically sustainable, and farmers definitely need to be profitable in order to have the resources to look after the environment and meet society's needs. So growers who can't maintain their operation in an economic fashion, they can't do much in order to meet the environmental challenges or society's needs for food and fiber. So again, these are the key to 4R is balancing between these three and not sacrificing the environment for economics. On the other hand, not sacrificing economics for the environment, but looking for those win-win situations. And in nutrient management, there are a lot of ways that we can both move towards optimizing fertilizer use efficiency, produce better crops, and protect the environment. Because when nutrients are in the crop, they're not wandering off the field and getting into trouble elsewhere. So to be a little more specific on environments in the 4R, there's really two main environmental issues that are related to nutrient management. One is the movement of nitrogen and phosphorus into surface and groundwaters through runoff and leaching, and the issues that causes either downstream or in the use of groundwater resources. P is a particular problem in freshwater ecosystems, and we've seen that with the issues we have in Eastern Canada, for example, on Lake Erie, and in Western Canada on Lake Winnipeg. And if you think about it, most of us in Western Canada are part of the Lake Winnipeg watershed. So phosphorus that gets off a farm field in Western Canada, some of that will end up in local lakes and rivers and can eventually lead to problems like algae blooms and anoxia that cause fish kills, and reducing general water quality, both for consumptive use by people and livestock, and also for other uses such as recreation. The other problem that is related to fertilizer use is greenhouse gas emissions from nitrogen applications. So when we apply nitrogen to the soil and it goes through the various processes in the nitrogen cycle, particularly nitrification and denitrification, a little bit of that nitrogen escapes as the greenhouse gas nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide is a particularly powerful greenhouse gas. It has about 300 times greater effect than carbon dioxide on the atmosphere and climate forcing than does carbon dioxide. So point I want to get across here is that 4R is an effective framework for dealing with both of these issues, making sure that nutrients get where they belong or where we're targeting in the crop. That way they add to the economic benefits, and by keeping them in the field and into the crop, we avoid some of these off-farm issues. So touching on some of the social goals and benefits of 4R, one we've already touched on is the by improving fertilizer management in the field and preventing off-field movement. We're reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the impact on food production and climate change. We're also improving local and downstream water quality. And of course, one of the big goals for farming is safe, nutritious food and sustainable food production. We could also add that things like vibrant rural communities, local job opportunities, and there are many other benefits that flow from a healthy farm economy. So moving on then to some of the on-farm economic benefits, improved return on nutrient dollars. So 4R can help growers select and improve practices they use to manage fertilizer and manure on the farm, and any other sources they use for nutrient amendments. So it can help improve the return on those nutrient dollars and make sure that they're getting the best bang for their buck. In a market access sense, as more and more of the marketplace and the food chains move to sustainable sourcing of their supplies, using 4R nutrient stewardship and being able to document and demonstrate that you're using a 4R plan on the farm will help with access to these sustainable supply chains going forward. And finally, again, economically viable farms are necessary in order to, for the growers to continue to thrive and survive in the competitive global environment of food production. So let's come down from that high level view of 4Rs and goals and benefits and talk about, come right down to the field level and start to talk about what happens on the ground. So the core of a 4R program is to adopt a set of best management practices that will help a grower meet the specific needs of their cropping system and optimize their nutrient management. So to help farmers with this and crop advisors, Fertilizer Canada worked with a group of experienced agronomists and research experts to develop some BMP guidance tables. And these guidance tables provide examples of what would be considered 4R BMPs for N&P management in different cropping systems in Western Canada. So if we take a quick look at these tables, you can see under right source, and I'm going to say this is at a basic level. So this is sort of the threshold for what are good practices or BMPs for 4R nutrient stewardship. Using ammonia-based formulations for fall, with the exception of UAN, apply N fertilizer in spring or in season, and inoculate pulse crops would be some of the right source, although one of those looks suspiciously like a right time practice that snuck in there. If we move into right rate, and I think this is one of the more important practices where farmers have a lot of control is set crop and field specific N rates. So treat each field or even subfields at as a specific cropping system and look at adjusting N rates based on the differences in yield potential between those fields. And then under right time, what are the appropriate times to apply fertilizer to improve efficiency and reduce loss? At the basic level, then we can talk about apply in the fall in Western Canada after the soil cools, or apply in spring before or at seeding. Now, not every practice can be 4R, obviously. Practices that we want to discourage, we can talk about them as not yet 4R. And one of those is, an example of one of those is given here, is that application on frozen soil and or snow-covered ground is an inappropriate practice for a 4R program. So, and then, under the right place, BMPs, one of the main ones there is apply in subsurface bands, injection or injection. And, broadcast and incorporation is still acceptable as a 4R practice in the spring. There's lots of work in Western Canada that shows that broadcast of unprotected nitrogen in the fall leads to higher losses. So before we leave that, we've looked here at the basic 4R, some basic 4R practices. What these tables also provide is they provide some guidance for improvement over time. So in addition to these basic practices, you can move up and look at what would be considered intermediate practices, and then finally advanced practices for our BMPs. And what we found is that in Western Canada, farmers are already using a selection of these basic 4R practices, and many are using one or more advanced practices as well. And we'll touch on that a little later and take a look at some of the information that's been gathered over the last few years on fertilizer practice in Western Canada. So just flipping over to phosphorus, as I say, we've got these tables, these guidance documents for nitrogen and phosphorus. And so far, Fertilizer Canada has, when they've been helping to build these out, has focused on nitrogen and phosphorus because those are the two most widely used nutrients in Western Canada, and also because they're also the two that are associated with some of the issues with fertilizer use that we want to reduce or mitigate. And these BMPs, are not just based on the opinion of that expert group we put together. They've also been backed up and verified by research. And so I want to touch next on some of the research that's been going on 4R practices over the last few years, and it's continuing into the future. So Fertilizer Canada, in partnership with grower organizations, some universities, and the provincial and federal governments, has supported a 4R research network, which has been investigating 4R practices and how they perform agronomically, environmentally, and economically for about the last half dozen years. And the fertilizer industry supports these research projects through contributions to the 4R Research Fund, which are then matched by a number of government and industry funding bodies. So Fertilizer Canada is currently developing a new set of projects to continue the 4R research drive. And this rogues gallery we've got up here shows some of the key players in the 4R research network. It's by no means a complete set, but there's been many others involved as well. But it is also, it's a pan-Canadian network. We've got David Burton in the Nova Scotia working on crops like potatoes in Eastern Canada. We've got Craig Drury and Ivan O'Halloran and Dr. Claudia Wagner-Riddell in Ontario. And then the West is well represented as well, with Dr. Mario Tenuta at University of Manitoba, Dr. Miles Dick at University of Alberta, and Dr. Jeff Shano at Saskatchewan. And then we've got a few other people who are like Dr. Tremblay and Dr. Eagle, who are working to bring some of this data together and doing some synthesis work. So just a quick tour then of some of the projects that have been part of this effort so far. And here we have some nitrogen studies, and I'll just focus you in on the ones that have been going on in Western Canada, which are towards the bottom of the table here. For example, Dr. Tenuta has been working on reducing rates and looking at ways to both maintain agronomic efficiency, but also reduce greenhouse gas emissions by manipulating timing and looking at enhanced efficiency fertilizers. And Linda Hall at University of Alberta has been working on some of the same types of effort or issues, looking at nitrogen stabilizers and how they can improve nitrogen use efficiency. But it's not all about enhanced efficiency fertilizers. For example, Miles Dick has been looking at the use of nitrogen and sulfur and how the interaction between nitrogen and sulfur can both improve the effort or improve the efficiency of nitrogen and maintain or improve crop yields on sulfur deficient soils. And in Western Canada, because we farm a lot of gray soils, there's a large number of sulfur deficient soils. So that's the nitrogen side. Moving over to the phosphorus side, and again, we'll just focus in on some of the Western Canadian work. Dr. Shano has been looking at placement of phosphorus fertilizer to limit snowmelt P losses in the Canadian prairies. So he's been investigating the way we can place fertilizer in fall to phosphorus fertilizer in fall in particular, to ensure that it doesn't leave the field in the spring when the snow melts off. And this is key because most of the runoff on Western Canadian landscapes occurs during snow melt in the spring. And then if we look down at the synthesis projects, Dr. Tremblay has been developing some decision support mechanisms. So he's been doing some modeling and looking at how we can predict nitrogen use efficiency and help develop appropriate rates by integrating soil, weather, and market data. And then Dr. Eagle has been looking at some of the economic and environmental aspects of it and the interaction between the economics and the environmental outcomes. So overall, a broad-based approach for our nutrient stewardship, where we're verifying, the network has been verifying agronomic practices while they measure and look at ways to mitigate some of those environmental issues. So that's we've gone through how BMPs fit into a 4R program a bit and how the research community is working to validate and fine tune some of the practices. What I wanted to do next was look at some of the data from something called the Fertilizer Use Survey that has provided a bit of a report card on actual source rate, time, and place practices that growers have been using. This has been going on for 4 or 5 years now. It's a very detailed survey with over 50 questions on it. Close to 1,000 producers participate every year. It focuses in on particular crops. In Western Canada, the focus has been particularly on nitrogen use and canola crops, although it covers some other crops and other nutrients. But I just wanted to show you this slide as an example both of the kind of information that comes from the survey, as well as what we're finding out there on the farm in terms of farmers using best management BAMPs that meet that 4R threshold. And so if we look at this, the writing or the printing's a little small. I hope you can read it. But if we look through this, we see that the major method of application of nitrogen in canola crops is applied in spring at planting. And if you think back to those tables we talked about, those guidance tables, that was identified, in spring at planting was identified as one of the, BMPs for nitrogen management timing. So we've got a high number of growers. The vast majority of growers are applying in spring at planting, applying in spring before planting, which is also an acceptable practice. So, we don't see, well, the one we can't really unpack is the applied in fall of previous year. Well, applying in fall before of the previous year is an acceptable practice in Western Canada for our nutrient stewardship, with some caveats on it after the soil cools, using banding and or using an enhanced efficiency fertilizer. We can't really unpack that one, but as you can see, fall application isn't a very large portion of or it doesn't carry a lot of acres in Western Canada. So leaving that alone, we'll move along then to, and just before we leave this, for those of you who are quick with math in your head, you've probably noticed that the numbers add up in any given year, may add up to more than 100%. And that's because some growers use two practices, and the survey catches both of those practices. So if they're doing a fall application of nitrogen followed by a further application in spring at seeding to handle their logistics and the nitrogen rates they have to get down, then it picks up both of those practices. So if we look at the phosphorus timing for a few minutes, we see it pretty much it's pretty much the same as the nitrogen timing in canola. So, most growers our canola growers are using some kind of direct seeding system that meets this 4R criteria, and we look at and applying their fertilizer at seeding. If we look at some of the other areas like right source, right rate, and right place, we find that there is a high correlation with 4R, and that most growers are using what would be considered at least basic 4R practices, and many are using more advanced practices. So if you want to find out more about these research resources, the research network results and the fertilizer survey, there's a number of resources available on the Fertilizer Canada website, and I'd encourage you to go dig in a little bit, especially there's also some other information for CCAs there that they can work through. And as well as the Fertilizer Use Survey. There's both some summary information on the Fertilizer Use Survey on the website, and if you want more detailed information, contact Fertilizer Canada. So I want to finish off with just a quick overview of some of the programs for retailers and crop advisors. We've talked about the research. Now let's talk about the implementation on the ground. And so there's a number of different programs that have been put together and are being pushed out to industry industry. The fertilizer retail organizations are working with Fertilizer Canada and other groups like the Canola Council and Pulse Canada to help get 4R implemented on the ground. And so one of the things that, one of the programs that Fertilizer Canada has championed is the 4R Designation Program. So this is a nationally run fertilizer tracking program in a way. It operates at the retail location level. And what happens with the designation program is the retail agronomists take some training in 4R nutrient stewardship. They attest to their competence in 4R. And then there's a couple of other steps that the retailer goes through to become a 4R designated retailer, and including attesting that they're using 4R principles and making their nutrient management recommendations to customers. And then during that conversation at the retail with the grower about their nutrient management and developing a nutrient management plan, the agronomist can work through with the grower some 4R material and basically provide the grower with some documented evidence of their how compatible they are with the 4R management practices. The other part of this program then is that it tracks the number of 4R consistent acres through the retailer, and then those can get reported after they've been anonymized up to Fertilizer Canada, and Fertilizer Canada can then use those gains or those numbers in terms of growers using 4R for some of the reporting needs they have for the industry and to government. So that's a voluntary program. A little more rigorous and a program is the 4R certification program for retailers, and it's currently being rolled out in Ontario and Prince Edward Island. It's a much higher level of commitment from the retailer. It's an audited program. It has a lot of the same principles and practices involved, but it is, as I say, it's audited and requires that the much higher level of documentation. It's rolled out in Ontario starting in 2018, and one of the reasons it's been initiated in Ontario is because of the phosphorus problems in the Lake Erie Basin, and Ontario has adopted it to kind of keep in sync with the American side, where some of the states like Ohio have adopted it as well. So let's just spend a minute or two on the 4R retail designation program and why we have that program. And so just to give you a bit more of the background, so there's just increasing pressure to demonstrate on-farm stewardship, and this pressure is coming from the public, the consumers at the other end of the food chain, but it's coming back to the farm then through the food chains, through the different organizations and companies that end up using farm products. It's also coming from the upstream side on the fertilizer industry to demonstrate that they are implementing practices and working with the retail industry to improve both the nutrient use efficiency and to reduce some of the environmental impacts. And one of the reasons the focus is on the retailer is that retailers and certified crop advisors and independent agronomists are all well positioned to assist farmers, but the retail is where the fertilizer changes hands. So it's a very great place to pass on that 4R information as well. And in the end, the 4R designation program provides participants with some recognition for doing the right thing, and then helps the entire industry demonstrate that they're doing the right thing. So just to finish off then, there is a designation toolkit available on the website. So you can download that toolkit, and it has all the information that you need at the retail level to get set up and participate in the program. So just to change gears a little bit, one of the important aspects of 4R and the 4R efforts in Canada has been partnership. And there's a growing network of partners who not only help deliver 4R at the field level, but also embed 4R in their own sustainability programs. And this includes industries and governments and grower organizations as well. And just to talk a little bit about one of those and give an example, one of those partners is the government of Saskatchewan. And today we have Kelsey Ellis on our panel with the government of Saskatchewan. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to her for a few minutes so she can give us an overview on how 4R fits into the Saskatchewan framework for measuring its efforts to mitigate climate change. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Kelsey.
All right, thanks, Dan, and hi, everyone. So as Dan mentioned, I'm just going to provide a bit of background on some of the work we've done within the Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture related to 4Rs and some of the policies we've developed related to 4Rs. So I guess just to provide a bit of background, Prairie Resilience is our provincial climate change strategy, and it was released in December of 2017. It made 42 commitments in 5 key areas related to climate change. And so among the commitments in the strategy also committed to track and report on progress towards a more resilient province. And this resulted in the creation of Saskatchewan's Climate Resilience Measurement Framework. And Dan, if you want to just advance. So yeah, this shows the 2020 report, which is part of the reporting within the framework. And so the Climate Resilience Measurement Framework was released in November of 2018, and it kind of demonstrates the government of Saskatchewan's willingness to take action to improve the province's resilience to climate change. And it includes 5 key areas, and those are natural systems, physical infrastructure, economic sustainability, community preparedness, and human well-being. So in total, there are 25 measures across these 5 key areas, and 5 of those are agricultural, and we are responsible for those 5 as the Ministry of Agriculture. Next slide. And so this slide shows the 5 targets that the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for. And you can see that there are 3 measures within the natural systems area and 2 within the economic sustainability area. And so I guess just a bit on how we developed these. It was important for us that they are simple and representative of key climate change resilience areas for agriculture, and that they are also measurable. So measures and targets which show the agriculture sector's progress towards climate change resilience are important for building public trust in the industry. And they also help us to track progress so that we know if we need to take action in a certain area to meet our targets. And as I mentioned, we do report on progress towards these targets annually. And Dan, if you just want to hit the advance again. And so I just want to bring, oh, sorry, previous slide still. I just wanted to darken that number 3. We just want to bring your attention to number 3 specifically, which is the 4R target, which is what we're talking about today. So our target is 25% of cultivated acres under 4R designation by 2025. So that's acres under that designation program that Dan was talking about. And we chose this because it helps us to measure the adoption of 4R nutrient stewardship and the efficient use of fertilizer. And of course, the efficient fertilizer use helps us lower greenhouse gas emissions and improve crop productivity and net farm income as well. And this target was adopted from a target that Fertilizer Canada had set previously. And next slide. So just to talk a bit about what we are doing to reach this target. First of all, we obviously worked with Fertilizer Canada to determine suitable metrics for this measure. And then we have established a 4R advisory committee, which has membership from government, industry, and academia. We did that along with Fertilizer Canada and development of a 4R work plan as well as part of that. We are also providing funding and in-kind assistance to Agriculture Applied Research Management, or Agro sites, to facilitate the delivery of 4R demonstrations. We're currently co-funding 12 active ag demonstration of practices and technologies, or ADOPT projects, related to 4R, along with Fertilizer Canada. We do also offer 4R as a sustainability initiative option producers can use to meet eligibility requirements for our variable rate mapping BMP that we offer. And we're focusing more on extension efforts related to technologies and practices that are appropriate to the adoption of 4R. And also, public trust is important for our ministry, so we are building producer awareness and understanding of public trust and the importance of sustainable fertilizer practices. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Thanks, Kelsey. And one of the things I've had the opportunity to do the last couple of years is actually go see some of these demonstrations and research projects through the Agri-ARM and the ADOPT program, and certainly a lot of very good and interesting work on 4R related practices going on throughout Saskatchewan. So let's go back to or move on to our panel, and for the next 15 or 20 minutes, we can get this panel to work. And I'm going to start off with kind of a general question for the panel on how long have you been involved with the 4Rs and what first drew you into the 4Rs? And I think there, why don't we start with Mike? Maybe you could start by answering that. So.
Thanks, Dan. You know, specifically probably over 10 years now. You know, at the time I was beginning to work with a precision ag company, which focused mainly on variable rate fertility. Zone management of fields is the cornerstone of variable rate fertility, with the goal of using 4Rs in every step of the process. Soil testing, of course, is also a critical part of 4R nutrient management, and it gives you tremendous insights into physical and chemical characteristics of the fields that we're dealing with, and also its potential limitations. And 4R really does a good job of dealing with fields that have, you know, limitations. And, you know, I thought with variable rate fertility and the approaches that we were taking, that it could be, you know, a good solution to some of the problems that growers were dealing with on the farm. And I also realized that each component of the 4Rs could be explained quite easily to the general public and could, you know, be used as a communication tool for consumers, especially those who know very little about agriculture and, you know, how our food is grown, which is likely the majority in a lot of cases.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, hopefully you've left a little bit for some of the other people, but a very complete answer. Let's move to Robin next. And Robin, if you could give us a bit of a view on how long and you've been involved with the 4Rs.
Thanks, Dan. I've been involved with the 4Rs for going on about 6 years now, initially with an independent retail and their Sustain platform through Winfield United, and now with Federated Co-ops and kind of the launch of Grown with Purpose, their initiative with the 4Rs. Kind of what drew me in first is that idea that we need to leave the land in as good a shape or better for the generation after us. And I agree with Mike in terms that the 4R is very simplistic view on sustainability. And I think it's very easy for farms to achieve and to be explained to the public. So that's probably what drew me in.
Okay, thanks, Robin. So Simon, we'll let you weigh in on this question.
Yeah, we started a few years ago as well. Being a big global company, we have sustainability goals, and this kind of really fits in and starts kind of as a ground level program. Starting with our agronomists, we started, you know, getting our agronomists raise that level of knowledge of sustainability practices. We got, you know, elevating the knowledge and getting them designated and then we moved to the retail level, you know, and really sort of making this kind of as a, for in our whole crop input division, kind of one of our real background main programs that now we're moving to like 100% of, and we've seen a lot of you know, very big enthusiasm of this, and so we really like to be part of this program, and we really think that it's a win-win, bringing the grower, having that as the center part of it, getting more grower involvement, and closing that relationship between the grower, the agronomist, you know, crop inputs. So.
Thanks, Simon. And I think you bring up a very important point that 4R is a global program. And the other important point I think you brought up is that Cargill, Cargill has a sustainability program that encompasses or includes their entire global operation. And all of the other major players in the food space, you know, the Bungees, the Unilevers, the Nestle's, the PepsiCo's, Walmart's, you know, both at the, you know, along the processing chain and supply chain and into the final retail. All of them have these sustainability programs, and all of them have a nutrient use portion to it that you know, growers will increasingly need to be aware of, and there's been a major effort to embed 4R into these programs so that growers don't have to, you know, the 4R becomes the platform or the standard for these programs, rather than each one having its own set of criteria around nutrient management. Just to finish up on that question, Kelsey, did you have anything you wanted to add about 4Rs?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on it earlier, but yeah, so I would just say that I was drawn to the 4Rs because of the designation program, and I just found it interesting because it's one of the only ways for us to measure what's going on in the field in terms of fertilizer management practices. And I appreciate its simplicity as well, and kind of that it's an all-encompassing measure that kind of captures all of the important aspects of fertilizer management. And I think there's not many other measures really out there that are able to do that. So.
Okay, thanks, Kelsey. So moving on to the next question, and I think we have pretty well answered this one when people were talking about how long they've been involved. But I'm just going to open the mic, and if anyone has anything to add on that to kind of finish up that discussion, just go ahead. Going once, twice, three times. Okay, let's move on then. So one of the key things as part of implementation is education, or getting the message out. And so I just wanted to go through and ask our panel where they're finding their 4R information and what they consider are some of the key places to go to get yourself educated. So let's start that one with Simon.
Yeah, so Fertilizer kind of has some great resources on their website through the e-learning. That's a good place to start. Various very different levels of from the basic to more advanced education material there. There's a lot of great material as well. If you're CCA, through the American Society of Agronomy, there's been a lot of webinars this year, especially with moving to more of a virtual environments. Been a lot of focus on 4Rs across North America, not just with nitrogen, but also we found that some of the micronutrients as well. So there's been some great material there, and also some local across the prairies, local research. You put a few of those up on your slides earlier, in the U of A, U of S. So there's some great resources there. just local as well as North America ones.
Mike, I was going to turn it over to you to see if you wanted to build that out a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. For myself, working with co-op retails and their producers with our Grown with Purpose online farm assessment tool, that's been a great source of education, hands-on learning, in the field with growers, and becoming a 4R certified agronomist as well with Fertilizer Canada, going through the training and the assessment and just talking and living the 4Rs, a lot these days. Industry presentations at conferences such as Farm Tech was another good source. Fertilizer manufacturer websites in some cases are also a very good source of 4R information as well. The Canadian Agronomist website, that's another one where you can find some good research information on 4Rs. And really, for the farmers on the call, if you have local 4R certified agronomists at your co-op retail or wherever they may be, certainly key in on that resource as well.
Thanks, Mike. So there's a lot of information and resources out there, a lot of it freely available. One of the things I did want to mention, which I unfortunately skipped over on one of the earlier slides, was the 4R certification, 4R nutrients management specialization, I should say, through the Certified Crop Advisor program. So that program, which is separate but supported by Fertilizer Canada, allows CCAs to challenge an exam on 4R nutrient stewardship, and they can become a certified 4R nutrient specialist under the CCA program. So it's even a little bit, a step more than the designated program through Fertilizer Canada. I wrote that exam last year. It is challenging. You really have to know your stuff to get through it. But I would encourage CCAs with an interest in 4R to take that route. So. Okay, so let's move on to our next question, and what does the future hold, and what are we trying to achieve what are the various organizations trying to achieve? So I kind of skipped over Robin on the last one, so I'll let her lead off this one.
Thanks, Dan. So there's kind of two things that I think in particular the co-op and us at farm level would like to achieve. And the first thing would be to recognize and quantify the acres and the efforts that lots of farms are already doing. One thing that I know from working with farmers is that there is many people that are already at least at a basic 4R with what they're already performing. And we just need to make sure we're doing the work to get those acres counted, mostly for potentially access to new markets, or as you were speaking about before, the companies that are now sourcing products that is only sustainably produced. It's going to give them access to all of those markets. And I think the other goal we should really have is, precise management of every acre. And I think in turn that will help make producers more profitable. And whether that is, managing field by field instead of entire crop types by, one type, or using basic things like soil sampling, all that kind of information, or even if you want to go all the way up to managing, acre by acre and using variable rate technology and precision farming like that. All of those kind of fall within the 4R management, and they are going to make farmers more profitable in the long run, which I think is important not only at the farmer level, but all the way up the retail chain. In our world, if the farmers aren't profitable, then the retails aren't very profitable. So it's kind of important that we all kind of work together.
Thanks, Robin. Simon or Mike, anything to add on the future goals from your point of view?
Yeah, we've got an aim to increase our acres every year, and just getting more of our growers involved and engaged in nutrient stewardship, getting more understanding and more awareness of the program, and you know that, as you say, that there's a lot of people already doing these practices, so tweaking their practices and making more efficient use of fertilizer, grow their understanding on looking after their soil and their farm. So it's, you know, there's a few different areas we would like to achieve that.
So I kind of, because we were segueing into the next question, I put it up on the screen, and Simon, I think you've answered a good portion of that. But Mike, if you want to kind of build that out a bit, go ahead.
Yeah, I think as far as what it means to me, or what it should mean to us, I think it really allows participants to share in a sense of pride and ownership of what we're doing on farms in Western Canada, and to share with the world that the fertilizer management practices of Canadian agriculture are second to none, and we should be proud of them. You know, I think it also gives us the confidence to share with consumers in particular that the food we produce is safe, nutritious, and that our #1 goal is to preserve or even improve the land, air, and water quality that we currently enjoy in Canada, and make sure that's sustainable for generations to come. I mean, that, to me, that's of utmost importance. So.
And Robin, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I think it's just a pat on the back to the producers that are already utilizing techniques like this, and all of the rest of the retail chain that's helping them achieve it.
And finally, on this particular question, Kelsey, you've already touched on how Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan government of Saskatchewan is interested in this, and how is it how are you going to interact with the retail industry to get those acres counted?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on some of the different initiatives we have going on in the province, and working with some of the retailers on the MLC advisory committee that we have set up. And yeah, I agree with the comments that have already been said, and that we know that producers are already practicing a lot of these sustainable practices, and it's really just about having those practices recognized so that we can talk about them and build trust in the industry. So that's something our ministry is currently looking at, and just looking at different ways that we can try to increase uptake in the designation program and just in for our nutrient stewardship in general.
So I'm going to go back to Robin, and just with this next question, and then we're going to move fairly quickly because we're at 1 hour and 10 minutes, and we want to leave a few minutes for questions from the audience. So I'm just Robin, would you like to take a shot at this one?
Yeah, so I think the benefits of 4R are kind of all the way across the value chain. At the farm level, it's definitely going to, help increase profitability, the return on investment, because we're just increasing the fertilizer use efficiency. It's kind of down to the, dollars and cents at that point. At the retail level, we're having far more in-depth conversations with farmers about not only their input needs, but also, the sustainability of the farm and how they're going to, move forward. And that's something that's really making conversations more valuable to us. And at the industry level, I think 4R is going to help us have a stronger social license to farm. Right now we're not regulated to use products in specific ways yet, but that probably is coming. And at some point we're hoping to be kind of on the forefront of that regulation, and being able to help make the legislation instead of just having to enforce it.
Thanks, Robin. So I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to switch to the last question and then we'll go to the phones, so to speak. So the final question then is, what one practice would most improve both economic and environmental fertilizer performance in Western Canada? So I'm going to ask the panel to weigh in on their favorite practice that would create improvements. And I think we'll start with Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think from my standpoint, it's site-specific management of fertility. I've been involved with this for quite a while over the last 5 or 10 years, and I truly believe that's where we have the most to be gained. Treating fields in more of that zone management regime, and really just focusing on both the production potential and also the limitations of fields, and managing them appropriately. So I really think that's where we can gain a lot of efficiencies.
Okay, and I certainly agree with you, as we have worked together, you and I, Mike, in the site-specific management and seen some great examples of how it's improved nutrient use efficiency and just the overall quality of crops and things like that. So moving on to Robin. Robin, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I think if I could pick one practice, it would be soil sampling. It is probably the most cost-efficient way to ensure you're putting the right nutrients in the right fields. And in our area here, we do a really good job, but I know across Western Canada, it's something that could be worked on.
Yeah, only about 20% of fields are sampled in any given year in Western Canada, and although a large number of growers sample some of their fields, and it's an old school practice in one sense, in that it's been around for a long time, but it's also a approach. Soil sampling is also changing. There's new techniques for analysis and new ways to get that data that sort of can help improve and create greater information for growers. And finally, Simon, your favorite practice?
Yeah, I like all those others that have been mentioned too. But if we think about the fertilizer itself, it's such a huge investment and a big cost, and a lot of it, we found is being lost. So using some kind of enhanced fertilizer product, whether it's a controlled release or a urease inhibitor, helps prevent the leaching or volatilization. That's going to really get the fertilizer where it's really needed and not being wasted. Gets it right into the crop. Helps with the control release. Not just environmentally benefits, but also you could possibly see some increase in yield and quality as well, having that time release. So it's kind of elevating that next best management practice. It's like next level that I think is a pretty good investment in helping protect a pretty big cost of an input.
Thanks, Simon. And I've just got to add my own favorite to this one as well, very briefly, because one of the things I've seen when I've been working with growers is, which I think is really important for sorting out that nutrient use efficiency, is just good field-specific yield numbers. And I think growers can gain a lot when they have accurate data on a field-by-field basis for their crops, and that includes things like calibrating their yield monitors and putting them through post-harvest cleaning programs so that they get good, accurate yield data. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Kelsey Hill, and we can finish up and take some questions from the audience. Kelsey.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So I think we had Mitch here who wanted to add on a few things. I'm just going to allow Mitch to talk. Are you there, Mitch?
I believe I am.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, just I'm Mitch Rozansoff with the Canadian Association of Agro Retailers. And I just wanted to provide some insights. I had previously worked in a John Deere dealership in Manitoba. And it's more of a challenge that I put to the agronomists is you have an opportunity to share a lot of good information and aggregate it all from the number of customers and the variety of customers that you work with. And I haven't heard anyone talk about the need to understand customers' equipment, especially air seeders. And the more knowledge that you can bring to your customers about the let me back up. The more you can understand the capabilities of the customer's equipment that you're making recommendations to on fertilizer and seed, the easier the 4Rs become, because you can do all this good legwork of soil sampling and building zones, but if the equipment doesn't have the capabilities, or if you're overwhelming the capabilities of the equipment, all that good work is gone. And so the challenge I put to you is take some time to engage the equipment dealerships in your area. And when they're putting on farmer training, ask to participate because you will become a more valuable agronomist to your farm customers. And the challenge I put to the farmers online is challenge your agronomists to understand your equipment. Because in some instances, the recommendations don't line up. The other aspect I would also recommend with regards to 4Rs is the value of section control on seeding equipment and the cost savings that can be had just in eliminating. You're not going to eliminate it 100%. But some of the data that I looked at in the Red River Valley of taking customer data, seeding data, and looking at the actual acres versus the seeded or planted acres, and the Red River Valley is pretty square. We were seeing 7 to 8% overlap. And so if you can bring that down to 1-2%, that's a significant savings, and that applies to 4R. You're not over applying, and you're not over applying because you intentionally are doing it. It's just the overlaps. And so if I were to make a recommendation to someone that's considering variable rate, is start with section control and get those overlaps down to 1-2%, and then move to variable rate.
Thanks, Mitch. That's awesome. Good insight there. I don't know if anyone from our panel or Dan has any comments further on that.
No, I agree with Mitch on that. Having worked in variable rate and precision agriculture, first as a researcher and later as an agronomist since 1992, the capabilities of the equipment are understanding the capabilities of the equipment and being able to work with them is certainly one of the barriers that have to be overcome in terms of precision ag or a variable rate program. So,
yeah, I'd even go so far as to the farmers. If you have a very good relationship with an agronomist and you're looking to make equipment upgrades, take your agronomist with you. The agronomist should be part of that decision as to, what are we trying to accomplish here with regards to fertilizer placement, seed placement, the volume of fertilizer, the widths you're looking at. Those are very important considerations that need to be discussed in the buying or upgrading decision-making process.
Yeah, I think those are
some landscapes. 6 to 8% overlap would be considered, low. I mean, there's lots of landscapes out there where it's much higher than that.
Yep,
so.
Agree. But that's what I was saying with the Red River Valley.
Okay, maybe we should move on to some other questions there, Kelsey. There are some.
Sorry, Dan, I don't think we have any other questions in the chat that I'm seeing. But yeah, I think, Mike, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, no, I just agree 100% with what Mitch and Dan are saying. I mean, you know, in the past being involved and still to this day being involved in variable rate fertility, yeah, I mean, there's a real fine line between what you can do and logistics on the farm. All those things have to be taken into consideration. But I would say, you know, there is a lot of farms that aren't using, you know, the technology that they've invested in to the utmost degree yet. So I think that's also, you know, from the other side has to be taken into consideration too. A lot of the investment is more or less just being used to steer the tractor versus using the variable rate drives on the air tank cart, for example. So.
Thanks, Mike. I'm not seeing any more questions in the Q&A box or chat box, but if anyone does have any questions for our panel, make sure to send them to my email there on the screen at khill@fertilizercanada.ca. I've also received lots of emails so far on the CEU credits, so I'll make sure to add your name to the sign-in list if you weren't able to get the QR code, but if you were, pulled out your CCA apps, that's great. And yeah, our contact info for myself and Brittany if you have any further questions on the webinar today. I'd like to take this time to thank all our panelists and Dan for moderating today. I think we had a really good discussion and we had a great time. Thank you.